Should I start on a close-up? Yes.
Hi everyone, Kim Vermaak here, the author of The Chronicles of Nadine. And the question that I have to ask you today is, how do you find the book inside you? So for a long time, I struggled with that. I wanted to become an author. I wanted to write a book. But to get started seemed like a massively daunting task. And so it's really a privilege to have Nico Steyn with us today. I met Nico some time back when he was assisting a lady that I know to set up video content for entrepreneurs, and I love dealing with Nico because he just made everyone feel so comfortable. So people who are like hysterically nervous, he drew out of them those unique qualities specific to that person, and he did it in such a relaxed way that it was actually very difficult to imagine how professional Nico really is. And he's got an absolutely wonderful CV, so I'm just going to ask him to explain to you a little bit about who he is and what he does, because sure, it's not kind of a CV that you can kind of explain. So, Nico, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself so the audience can connect with you.
Thank you, Kim, and that was such a lovely introduction. I think we should just get going right away. I mean, just say I've been in television for these years, and I really started at a very early age working at Mnet, in fact, with continuity presenters. And so that's why I really worked well with how to get things out of people and to understand sort of the psychology about being on camera and working with people that way. And because I've always written quite a lot of stuff, it sort of made me meander between directing or dealing with the content and putting it together. So I think that's in short good enough. I'm a movie maker and an ideas person, and I just love working with people.
I love that because, you know, my big bucket list is that I want to have my books made into movies. But before you get to making a movie out of your book, you've got to write the book. And that's good script. Scary for a lot of people. It took me 10 years to start writing. It was such a daunting task that I'm like, I can't do this. And my family was saying, yeah, but why don't you just record some of the stories that you make up for us? And I'm like, The fear was a huge thing. And it was only when a friend really held my hand and made me see that the fear that I had was completely irrational. But you've perfected it. You've actually done a whole process that helps people to get that story out of them. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's very daunting. I think that when I first started, I've also for 4 or 5 years threatened to write a book, and you know, you write for 3 months. This is nonfiction, so you write for 3 months and you put some stuff together and it goes in a direction, and then suddenly you go into a new direction, and then you start all over again 3 or 4 months later. So it is a little bit terrifying. And so I did a lot of research, and I figured out ways to get to record and rather talk your book. So initially when I started, it was just so different that people didn't really get what I was saying. And so I took a few steps back to research why it is that people are sometimes a bit insecure about the book that they have in them, because I think everybody's got a story. Look, even as a filmmaker, I have to tell you, you bump into people all the time who have fantastic stories, whether they are fiction or nonfiction, things that really happened to them, or just a fantastical idea. But so many times people are insecure about their writing and they battle to get started. And so I thought, if one had to really borrow from the film business and say, what is it about structure and what is it that helps writers to get started, then maybe you can make them a little bit more comfortable and then they could start. And so in the process, I was working on my book as well. It is done at the moment, and I have 60,000 words which are ready to go, but I don't feel my book is really ready for this time right now. So I've been working to coach people, and for the first time around last December, I put together 4 people in a room and I tested this and I prototyped, and within 7 days we had people reach between 35,000 words and 75,000 words, which was fantastic. So that was kind of just how the process evolved over time.
Wow, that's incredible. So on a good day, I can type, if I'm doing my fiction book, I can probably do 5,000 words. If it's nonfiction, I can probably get out about 10,000. How the heck do you get a book out of someone in 7 days?
So it's really about the planning that goes into it. So I'm a firm believer. I mean, a lot of creative people, we procrastinate quite easily, and 10,000 words or even 1,000 words could seem really daunting. But if you think about it, if you really just sit down and you start going, nonfiction, you could probably write a good 1,000 words in half an hour to an hour. So why not be able to push more? Well, if you know where you're going or you have a good roadmap, a good start. And so I borrowed what I know from television writing, series writing, and film writing to see how one can really structure something well. So when I do a course like this in 7 days with people, the first stuff that I would do is the first 2 days we spend with why you're writing, exactly what you're writing, and who you're writing for, which are some critical decisions that you have to make up front. And of course, then to start structuring how all of the beats and all the pieces are going to sit together. Your structure is one of the most important things, and then the writing is easy. So in our case, what we do is we record, we dictate, we actually do a series of interviews, and during the interviews, the author would speak their book, essentially talking it, and it is on camera, so we record it, and then that gets translated and transcribed, and then it goes into editing. So roughly, if you think about a 60,000 word book, you could record it probably in 8 hours if you did it nonstop. It's like watching 4 movies.
I need to ask you about the recording.
Yeah.
Obviously, the software differs dramatically, but I tried to do a little bit of dictation some time ago, and in the scene that I was writing, I used the word dagger. Now, obviously, I'm South African, but the software pulled it up as dagga. So if you're not South African, you're watching from another country, that would be the South African equivalent of marijuana. And here is this very clean
this character called marijuana.
And the person says, "Oh, you dropped your dagga." How do you overcome those little glitches for what the word actually means?
Yeah. Look, they are going to happen. I must say that there are 2 different softwares. I actually just bumped into one last week, which is phenomenal, and I cannot remember the name of it. I'm going to say the name and I'm actually going to put it in the link so people can use it if they want. It's phenomenal, and there are some really amazing ones. I started a few years ago, probably. At first we were using Dragon, which was nice. You can teach it, and it becomes more and more used to your dialect or exactly how you pronounce words. And then we basically essentially use an online one, and it is fairly accurate. And we just go and research, search and replace if there are specific words that it gets wrong. Because the ones that we use now don't have a learning skill. There's no AI that improves it.
Okay, excellent. Nico, I know you prepared a couple of slides to just help teach people the process of extracting some parts of their book. Can you share that with us?
Sure. I mean, I thought just to put some stuff together from what we do and just maybe show you some of it. And I've mentioned several times already what structure does. And so I want to show you structure. And when I first researched structure, even just for movies and series, the thing that you get across or come across the most is, of course, beginning, middle, and end. And it is good, and many people teach it, and it's what everyone talks about. But I started realizing that if you, the original source material of beginning, middle, and end comes from Aristotle, who looked at those plays, the early days plays, and the observation that he made was that there are three parts, but he calls the 3 parts the complexity, the knot, and the unraveling. Now, what I like about those themes, particularly those words, is that they are so descriptive in giving us a sense of what each of those parts do. So in everything, whether it's presenting or whether it's doing a talk online or doing a keynote session or so, what I always work with people is these 3 segments. And it doesn't mean that your whole book is only beginning, middle, and end. It almost means that even when you work on a scene has a beginning, a middle, and end. And the beginning of the scene has a beginning, a middle, and end. And the beginning of the scene has a beginning, a middle, and end. And once you get that picture that this is something that you almost superimpose it into every paragraph, into every sentence even that you work with, your structure is going to flow so much better. And complexity for me is that thing that means life is difficult. How do we set this up as a scene, as a story, as a part of the story? Where the knot deals with all of those different perspectives of it. And that's kind of as the story really gets into flow. And of course, by the end of it, when you want to get to the unraveling, it's that beautiful aha moment of a thread, a golden thread that was in the story all along, and you've craftily sort of placed it everywhere so that it became natural and leaves us with a satisfying ending, because that's something that a lot of people, when they're in a hurry and they don't have the ending quite sorted out, a new character arrives or some magical power arrives or some technology explodes and then it solves the problem. And that can be very unsatisfying for a reader or for a viewer to watch a story and have it unfold in an uncomfortable kind of way. Sid Field, who teaches screenwriting, calls them milk and cookie moments. He says you wake up in the middle of the night and you really wonder what happened to this character or how this happened to be there at the right time, and that keeps you awake, and then you have to have milk and cookies while you think it over. And so structure for me is something that's important because it is superimposed in every part of your story, in almost every paragraph, in every chapter, in every part, and in every book, micro and macro.
Now that kind of sounds a little bit complicated to me, because I
Okay.
have to think about every tiny sentence. But actually, having worked with you beforehand on some other things, you simplify it a lot more. So there's the science behind it, but then also the easing, making someone feel comfortable enough to draw it out of them. Yeah. So any other tips that you have for authors that have to get through that structure? What do you work with? Mind map? How do you work on that?
Yeah. So what I like working with was Dr. Edward de Bono first introduced the ideas fan, or the concept fan, and I'm just going to jump to it, and unfortunately don't have a better picture than this of the concept fan, which I already filled in. It's part of the course when we work with it, and basically what he said is there are concepts and there are ideas. So if I had to take you through just the broad strokes of the concept fan, the concept fan says there's a broad direction to get to an idea, and the concepts are the ones that define, they're almost just categories of ideas, but ideas are things that you can physically execute. So here's the difference between concept. A concept is broader category, and an idea is a tangible something that you can execute on. And so what he uses is this from a broad direction, moving into concepts and moving into the actual ideas that are the executable ideas. So you almost see something that looks a little bit like a fan. And so for me, this broad direction is the topic of your book. And there you would say, in this instance, I wrote Nico's special effects book because I was demonstrating to people how I would do a special effects book. And then your next section is your chapters, or the concepts are really your chapters, where you'd say, in this case where I was talking about a book that is about special effects, I said, I'm probably going to talk about the beginning years, and then I'm going to talk about the big breakthroughs, and then another chapter may be the future of this and where it could go. So I just very simply said, okay, let's look at perhaps 3 broad sort of areas. And then inside each chapter, there are these subheadings or points that you want to make. And those are really where the actual ideas go, where you really start talking about how do you talk about the beginnings, for example, the early days of cinema. Where did special effects come from? Where were the first effects? How did stop frame photography and stuff start happening with movies like King Kong, and some of those in early days, Ray Harryhausen, who did special effects in those days, and so on. And then you want to get into the big names who really started populating this world and making effect more broad stream. People like Steven Spielberg and people like James Cameron and so on. And then the last chapter would talk about where it's going, where nowadays we have movies that deal with characters who can act on the scene, and they can be 50 years old, but the technology in real time can make them look only like 30 years. And you're going, wow, if that's where special effects are now, where is it going to go in the future? And so that gives you a broad structure very quickly of how you can place stuff. But as you start saying, where does Pixar fit into this? I go, oh, okay, probably Pixar would be an idea that I want to talk about. And that feels like it's middle towards new, because where's Pixar now? They've been bought out by Disney. And so you see new ideas pop out, and now you want to start talking about the companies behind the scenes that grow these companies. So you may start saying, but there's another chapter here somewhere between chapter 2 and 3, which is going to be talking about the enablers and funding and research and development. And so you can see how you can then jump between ideas and concepts, and they influence one another so that you start growing more and more ideas. And I've just used this as a tangible. I use this in a sort of broad concept of special effects for a movie, but it can be in your story, because you can say, my character gets somewhere, what does he need to do this next, or how do we get there? And then getting there becomes another introduction to a new broader direction or a new concept that you can introduce. And so they inspire one another, and it just keeps expanding. And something that I want to give you as a tip is, I always do my stuff on stickies, on post-it pads. I'm always running around with a post-it pad. There's post-it pads in the studio. There's post-it pads in the back, and one is a schedule, and those are ideas that I keep working on. So you always just write 2 or 3 words that just cue it for you, or sometimes think about how you can even draw a picture. You know, if you could draw something as a map, and it's a quick little emblem or something that means something to you, you put that up somewhere, and later when you see it, it demonstrates an entire concept for you, for your book, and for a section or a chapter. And so you can constantly work with these. And the nice thing about them is you can change the order, because you just, you know, move them around on the wall or on the glass plate where you work, a window or so, and it's alive. Because I think that's what brainstorming is about. It's about keeping the process alive and growing and just expanding, so that you have so many ideas. Because remember, if you have greater volume, you're going to get greater quality. Whereas if you just brainstorm the first 2 ideas that come up, chances are they sort of iffy, and you could probably push it a little harder to fill a whole sheet of 30 ideas, and then you're going to come up with better ideas in there. So brainstorming techniques are designed to go, let's go for great volume, because the quality will come from it. Gosh, I talk a lot, hey?
No, it's all good. I think that authors can attest to that. I love that kind of concept. I'm kind of still stuck in the making you look 30 years younger, because I kind of want that technology.
I know, it's crazy.
Steven Spielberg, and by the time I actually get someone who wants to make my book into a movie, I might really need that technology to make me look younger, like at the same age that I actually wrote the books.
Look, by the technology, if you look at where the technology is now, it is so phenomenal what you can do, particularly in a 3D space. And I think with the environment that we're in now, you're probably going to see a huge trend of AI style movies beginning to happen, because we couldn't put actors in dangerous situations, and you're probably going to find that world it's moved tremendously. 3D and 3D rendering and the speed at which you can work has dramatically improved over the last 3 years. And I'm pretty sure that it lined up for this time quite specifically, and particularly the kind of movies that you write, or the kind of books that you write that are in a fantasy realm, can benefit from that tremendously down the line.
Well, if I have a look at something like the Jurassic Park movies, you know, I mean, those look incredibly realistic. And dragons are, after all, just like dinosaurs with wings.
Dinosaurs with wings, there you go. There are a few serious archaeologists and researchers who just crucify us right now.
Yeah, no, well, they're not invited to the channel. This is only just for fantasy people and
excellent,
people who do nonfiction.
I love it.
Okay, excellent. So what are some of the challenges that people have when they're trying to go through the process of creating a book in such a short time? And what are big learnings that they've come across when they've tried to approach it?
I think most people are surprised at how easy it really is when you get started, because that's what you've got to do. You just have to start. And I think the moment that you feel that rhythm and you get into that flow and you get rid of distractions, and I think that's really the thing for me as well. You know, when I did my personality check, which is Clifton Strength Finder, my #1 talent comes up as focus. And so I can be totally bulldog on something and just focus, but I can also be distracted by something else, and then I'll start focusing on that, and I'll start focusing on something, and eventually I'm going in a different direction. And so I found that the thing that you battle with the most in normal writing and sitting down and saying, I'm going to commit to an hour a day or 2 hours a day. I'm actually working with somebody on a play at the moment. And the thing that's very difficult about it is to get your focus back to where it is. You know, the way our mind works, it is designed to be distracted. If you really think about it, if you go back to caveman and how in prehistoric times we kind of lived, it was about hunting. It was kind of, find food, have sex, sleep, get lots of sleep so you can do it all again tomorrow. It was, in the basic sense. So I think that the brain is designed to go, what's wrong here? What's distracting me? What's not looking right? Should I run? Should I fight? And because of that, it's very hard for the brain to shut down and just think about one thing and focus. And I think that's what you have to do so much when you write. So even while you're busy writing, if you're writing on your computer and an email thing pops up in the corner that says you got another mail, and it's a thing, it's a shiny thing and it distracts you. And the moment that you're there, the scientists tell us it takes something like 20 minutes to get back to where you were before that email started. And so to not have any distraction around you and to really go on a retreat or to really cut off from technology for hours on end and just go is the best way to get into flow. And that's why I quite like doing it in 7 days, because we see the results just because it's such a focused effort. We don't have technology in the room that distracts you. You're only in the moment and it just goes. And I think that's kind of an important one for me.
What you're saying is very important, because definitely the cell phone, I mean, that's like a killer, social media and that. But yeah. I do find when I wrote my first book, my father went into hospital that year, and he was starting to have kidney failure. Now, miraculously actually made it, but I hadn't released the first book then, and I had watched a video with J.K. Rowling, and she said that her mother passed away before the books came out, and her mother was a great lover of reading. And when I watched that interview, I thought to myself, that's not going to be me. I'm going to finish this book. My father is going to see this book. And I just went guns blazing. I spoke to my editor. I said, this is the thing. I'm terrified that my father's going to pass away. And she said to me, I'm with you. And we got the book out. Mercifully, my father actually did make it. But I was so driven that any kind of distraction was like, that's not part of the plan. The part of the plan is to get this done. And we printed out the advanced readers copies. We couried them down to the coast where my parents are, and I got photographs of them standing with the book. So that is really the power of focus. I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have that driving force.
A motivation. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and I think there are different ways. I think for me also, the other reason that I quite enjoy working with a group of people, I mean, as I said, we did that test, and then of course COVID hit, and I've been doing it, working on one-on-one with people online, which slows down the process quite a bit. And it does mean that I can help them drive and I can help focus, because I make a call every day and we work it for 7 or 8 days. And even though it's taking a little bit longer, there's a good focus about it online. If you hit it for 2 or 3 hours a morning, a few mornings in a row. But what was wonderful about doing it as a group was that you have such support and understanding for one another's piece. And obviously you have to keep people focused so that they focus on their own work. But in those breaks that they do take, when they start sharing information and inspiring one another, there's a good, healthy competition sense, and there's also a really great support sense, because 7 o'clock at night, somebody comes and says, hey, how are you doing with this? And suddenly, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Somebody comes up with an idea and they go, what if you did this? Or if you have a difficulty with this, discuss it with somebody. And the moment that you articulate it, new ideas come up. So it is a great thing. Even now at the moment, the play that I'm working with, it's really lovely to sit with Ted every second day or so and go, I was thinking about this scene and it can bridge really well into this. And suddenly it explodes and we brainstorm something quickly and something new comes up. Particularly in a play, because it's so much more driven by the dialogue and what the characters are doing, the plot is very easy because we've established that. The hard part is how to get from here to there and how to make a character do an adjustment and get there. And those are interesting conversations to have with people, because it almost becomes a little bit more about the philosophy of the character and about, real deep, serious thinking about how this character should behave now and how they should respond to these words. And so it's really nice to bounce it off with somebody.
Because there's no special effects. So
no, it's a lot harder, I find. Yeah, I found it very, very hard to write a play because I am tempted to want to do scene changes and rely on scenery, and you can't rely on anything. In fact, I was talking to an actor who said, so where are you placing the scene? I see there's something in a boat and it's very romantic because it's on the Nile and they're going to the other side of the Luxor bank where the Valley of the Kings lies and everything. It's beautiful, but none of that can happen on stage. Of it is only what the actor will bring. And he said, well, you know what, an actor is not really, if you have a guy sitting with an oar or something, it's not really what actors like. So let the actors sort that out, but rather just write the good dialogue. And it was such an eye-opener for me, because as somebody who first thinks visually, I had to push myself really hard to start thinking about the dialogue and the character and how this character is going to behave, because good dialogue will make us buy into it. And once we buy into what the character is thinking, we will start going along on that journey, and it won't be a boring play. It'll be something magical, I think.
Very cool. Yeah, I find with my writing, I mentioned to you earlier on that sometimes I write myself into a corner, and then I actually need my husband to help me brainstorm through it, because I'm saying, I'm in this situation, my character's in the situation, how do I get out? What do I do? And we workshop it, and it actually helps me with some really difficult situations, because he'll start asking me questions, and he'll say, I know I had this one scene where these two young people had to go and rescue guys who basically are like war veterans. They should be able to get out the situation themselves. And my husband said to me, what do they have with them? Do they have any experience? These kinds of things. I'm like, oh, no, they don't have that. And they don't have that. And so then the scenario unfolds, because now that everyone knows what's at stake and what's available, you can now start coming up with options to get them through that challenge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A friend of mine who writes with children's books and children's series once said to me, one of the first exercises she gives writers is to say, these characters are in a cave. It's a magical cave, and at some stage the front of the cave collapses and the characters are stuck inside, and she is always interested to see how they're going to get out. But the moment that people resort to a magic wand or something, it breaks some of the spirit of what it is that writers should do, because we shouldn't just reach for a magic wand. You have to solve the problem by getting dirty, and your hands get dirty and you get in and you come up with a real solution, not just some magic, And I think that's an interesting exercise to do, just as a challenge for yourself.
Well, I have to do that all the time, because in my books, I don't allow magic at all. The reason that I do is because a lot of my readers are Christian readers, and although I own the whole of the Harry Potter series, I know that there's a certain segment of the market that actually don't want to have magic inside books. So I must say that recently I had a little bit of a challenge, and I'm like, oh, I wish there could be magic. I could get out of this scenario much easier. And I could just imagine, like, because he's an Emerald Forest Dragon Whisperer, so they're really into nature, and I could imagine him like shooting over this vine and ensnaring the attacker. So I had to do a lot of research, and I actually found this horrible plant. I got this video on dangerous plants, and then almost like paper thin plants that they hang down like this, and they've got these little spikes on them. And the guy, when he was walking, you can't see them, and they're hooked into his eye, into the skin over here and in his face. And you can't pull them out in a normal way. You've got to kind of reverse pull them out. So it's actually kind of a dangerous situation. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I can use that in the book. If we could just lure these guys towards this thing, they'll actually trap themselves. So, but it took a lot of research to not get through the magic thing, that temptation.
Not to go for magic, yeah. There's that famous saying, I think it is in Greek theater, a lot of the Greek plays used to have, I think, I can't do the pronunciation, I can't sort of see it in front of me, Due machina or something. It's a saying that says, leave it to the gods. And sometimes in the plays, in the third act or in the final act, the clouds would open up and a big machine would come down and just lift them out of the trouble. And you'd go, this is not really how life works. But that was kind of how they solved it in those plays, because, you know, they could rely on the gods to kind of do it for them.
That's true.
But you see it in movies and series sometimes. You know, I feel if I've been watching an 8-part series or a 13-part series, and sort of by episode 7 or 8, they start introducing a new character, and you're going, that's a little bit strange. Is this going to be their solution to get out of this problem? Because you want to walk the whole way with a character. You don't introduce a character that late in a show, you know? And that's kind of sometimes just trying to solve something just because you didn't think it through.
True. Okay, Nico, so what are the other things that you can chat to your authors about, giving them a little bit of advice on wrapping up their book, finishing things that some of your team members actually struggled with?
Okay, so I think the other part, and I mean, it's also, I just thought to show you another tool, which is, if you've done all this expansion and you've got so much, I think sometimes one of the first questions that somebody should probably ask is, do you have, in the reverse of do you have a book in you, the next question is, maybe you have 10 books in you. In fact, I was working with an entrepreneur who just had so much information that he wanted to teach, this is nonfiction stuff, that he suddenly realized that he probably sits with not just the one book, but probably with 2 different markets. And because of that, potentially even 3 different books. And immediately when he did that, he realized that instead of cramming all of it in one book and having a half-hearted attempt because it feels rushed, you know, sometimes you have to also, even with information, same as a story, something has to wash over people a little bit. They have to have time to take it in, to work with it. I don't necessarily mean, I'm not a big fan, unfortunately, of Tolkien and those, because I think that the writing is just quite, it just carries on. So, I mean, the Lord of the Rings, I call them the Lord of the Snore movies, just because they just move so slowly, devastating slowly. And for a movie, you know, a movie is 2 hours, it's 60 minutes and 60 minutes, and it's actually 4 30-minute segments, and there's a very specific format to it. And when you disregard that and you make a 3-hour movie, I mean, I was surprised, because after 3 hours of sitting and moving around and feeling really uncomfortable in my seat, they walk over this hillside and it says to be continued. And I was ready to throw popcorn at the screen, you know, because it was really upsetting. I've invested a lot of time here and we're really nowhere. This is just the beginning of the journey. So there's that transition to think about when you're going to write a book and you transition into a movie. There are other disciplines in that space, and you have to respect that, because of course the diehard fans, the Tolkien fans, wouldn't notice that. But filmmakers and people who consume regular movie kind of material won't understand what you're doing, because you're working in a genre that you're disregarding some of their rules. And because of that, it may not sit so much. And that's why it doesn't sit well with the non-fans, because it's a boring movie. 3 hours of just walking. And the last episode, the third movie, is 3 hours of greeting and saying goodbye. What's that? sorry to all the fans, apologies. So let me move into a tool that you could use if you have so much information.
We just have to insert over here, warning, you know, like this movie
spoiler alert.
Content that
Spoiler alert. Oh, I'm so sorry. That really messed
for Tolkien fans.
It messed with it a bit. So there's something that I work quite a bit with to help people to distill their information and to narrow it down and get the focus again. And this is something that was invented by Kaohiro Ishikawa, who first did research, I think, in the 70s of work overlap. So this is something that comes from the corporate world, and it's really called a fishbone diagram. And the reason you can see it there is that it has multiple, almost like little gray, fish bone, and it all moves towards the head of the fish, if you like. And so what he does is he says, let's start by writing it's a cause and effect model. So what he would do is he says, there's this effect that I don't quite like, and you put that down at the head of the fish, and then you work it back to major influences and lesser influences. So there would be big fish bones, and there'll be smaller fish bones that influence this, are the causes of this effect that you don't want, or this effect that you notice. And so if you then start saying, let me use this model, and I write the part of the book. This is the chapter that deals, let's go back to the special effects movie. This is the book on special effects. This is the part that talks about the pioneering years. Then you can start writing all the broad ideas down on the outer rims of this fishbone diagram, and try and structure or prioritize the points under each one of those. So it almost feels like the major points are the subheadings of your part of a book, your chapter headings, and then the minor points are sort of the subheadings that you're going to write. And it's just a way of trying to form structure for what it is that you do. And the moment that you have that focus, you're immediately going to know which subheadings you want to throw out, or you want to move into new chapters where it makes more sense. And ultimately, you're going to say, this one may not be so important, so let me see if we can cut that out and move, work around it. So it is just really a way to narrow it all down again, which is quite a handy tool to use.
Super.
I hope that answers something.
Sorry?
I hope that answers some of it.
Yes,
I know
yes.
I talk a lot today. I've had 3 cappuccinos already. I'm sorry.
What would authors be without coffee? I mean, I actually think that it's like, you get for cars, you get leaded and you get unleaded. And I think for people, you get authors, and they have to have, their fuel is coffee. So,
coffee. Definitely coffee. And I made the mistake of sitting with a cappuccino, 2 cappuccinos, actually quite late in the afternoon. I had a talk last night to do. And would you believe it, 4 o'clock this morning, there was a tiny piece of dialogue for the scene in the play, and it just made total sense. And I had to get up at 4 o'clock and start writing because the dialogue was just pouring out of these characters. And I thought, if I don't capture it now, I know it'll be lost. And so that's sort of one of the side effects of it.
I definitely understand that. I started writing at 1 o'clock this morning.
Mm.
But yes,
not so hot if you have to do a talk 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right?
No.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, that was entirely my choice. I had another book idea that came through. It started yesterday, and then at 1 o'clock this morning, I just started writing it. So I'm like 12,000 words into it. But it's nonfiction. Well, it's for new authors. It's nonfiction. So, awesome. Okay. Let's wrap up. I want to ask a quick question. If someone wanted to do your program, you've got a couple of different programs, but can you tell us how they would go about getting involved in your program?
Absolutely. I think still, before you spend any money, and I'm a firm believer of that, is just to sample some stuff and see. So I do have a structure workshop that I do online as a course. And obviously now that we're beginning to get out of a lockdown and we can move around again, I'm thinking of running some of these workshops in person as well, because you do get a lot more and you can exchange a lot more when you work with other people. But I would say if you go onto the website, you'll see I've now placed it on nicosteyn.com. And on the website, there's an option to do the book on you just as a freebie to work through some of these ideas that I mentioned today and just try it, because I think that it's the initial excitement levels of seeing your idea work that will make that little thing grow and become something. And once you have that enthusiasm and you have that kind of commitment, then of course I would love to work with people and help them. And even if it's just for some advice, do look for my email. It's there. And I'd love to just chat to people and even just give some advice. But I think the thing to do is to really start. My partner here at the studio is Mark Sham from Suits and Sneakers, and Mark has just made a commitment literally 2 days ago to start writing his book. So I'm thrilled about it because it's the kind of commitment, and he's the kind of person that now that he's done this and put it out there into the ether, he's ready to go 2 hours a day. Every morning I'm going to write, every day I'm going to work on it. And it's wonderful. So it doesn't matter what methodology you use. You can record it, you can write it, you can do whatever you like. But the good thing is to just start somewhere and find that little fire, find that little flame, and it'll ignite something huge. And all of the best to make it a 60,000, 70,000 word book, which will be great.
Well, that's exciting. I mean, I'm so jealous now because to actually have a partner with you that can guide you through the process. I mean, who wouldn't say yes to that?
I don't know if he always likes what I have to say. In fact, we had a discussion about this yesterday where I just said to him, I do think the difference, and I mentioned it in the beginning, there's a big difference between sitting down to write and talking your book. And when you talk the book, even this conversation that we're having right now is quite authentic and it's real because we're plucking these words from our mind as we speak. So it's quite natural and it flows. And if you're going to read this back, you're probably going to like this character a lot more than you would one that was written. Because if you write dialogue sitting down, there's a strange other thing that happens because a lot of authors feel that because they're putting it down, they're putting words down on paper and it's going to be in print, and there's a different type of commitment for this to live forever. It has a different weight to a conversation that is fleeting and in the moment and it's authentic. And suddenly we start thinking about other words we would rather use. And 10 minutes into that process, the moment you go near the thesaurus or the moment that you went near a dictionary, you start becoming Shakespeare. And then it's not you writing anymore. There's something else writing. There's another persona that takes over. And that's what I've seen in particularly the nonfiction stuff. When people talk their book, it tends to be more personal and warmer in authenticity to record it. And that's kind of my take on it anyway.
I think kind of in nonfiction, there might be a different feel to it. There'll be more of a temptation to use those more formalized words. But I think in fiction, it's a secret that most of us novelists have actually got split personalities. So
okay. There you go. So I've seen it now that you mention it.
One of these characters just kind of like spill out over there.
Yeah.
But Nico, I just want to say thank you so much for participating today. I really appreciate it. For everyone who needs to get Nico's email address, it is going to be at the bottom of the description. And just as a quick thing for those people who are new writers, one of the tools that I found amazing was Pro Writing Aid. It really helped me in terms of self-editing before my work went out to an editor. So check out the link for that as well. Nico, thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. I look forward to hearing more about what's happening in the space, and also your partner's book. I want to hear about how that's going.
Excellent, will do. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Bye for now.